Suspected serial killer Bruce McArthur.
Toronto police are also working on another high-profile murder investigation, one that's already yielded some horrifying details.
When they removed 2 large planters and in them found the dismembered remains of at least 3 people.
And this week, there was shock when police announced they believe Toronto landscaper Bruce McArthur has killed at least 5 men in the city.
Is it fair now to call Bruce McArthur an alleged serial killer?
It is, yes.
That's a pretty sharp turnaround from this comment made by Toronto's police chief just a couple of months ago.
The fact that there was a serial killer that was out there, the evidence does not point to that. The evidence does not suggest that.
But freelance reporter Justin Ling would argue it did. He's been looking into the men's disappearances since 2013 and was among the first to raise the possibility of a serial killer in Toronto's gay village. So how did he start piecing that together?
Let's begin with that, Justin. I mean, it's the sad truth that people go missing in this country all the time. And sometimes we never know what has become of them or why they've disappeared. What led you to conclude that there might be a serial killer behind the disappearances of these men?
Well, if you actually look through all of the missing persons reports for Toronto and across the country, a lot of the times there's a pretty clear explanation, or you find a body at some point. So whether it's mental health, whether it's addiction issues, whether they're elderly, might be an Alzheimer's patient, there's usually a pretty good range of explanations why people go missing. It's actually relatively uncommon to have somebody go missing, especially for more than a year, who are middle-aged, who don't necessarily have addiction or mental health issues.
But how do you get from that to serial killer?
Well, exactly. So one case by itself might not be a big red flag. When you have 3 cases in the span of less than 2 years of 3 guys who share so many similarities, who are tied to one relatively small geographic area, same general skin tone, same general build, same facial hair, same kind of bars they frequented, it's so incredibly unlikely that they would just disappear. And now there was a lot of narratives I heard around the time that, maybe one of them was tired with their life. One of them was married with kids and was going to the village and kind of to gay bars, quietly. The narrative was maybe he just picked up and left, left his bank account, left his car, left his kids, and just disappeared. And that was kind of the narrative for several of them. And I just didn't buy that. I mean, it just doesn't explain 3 disappearances over a relatively short amount of time with that many similarities.
So why didn't police hone in on that? Because as we just saw, the chief was saying, no, come on, that's not what this is.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons why. I think police are just naturally drawn to the sort of the most boring explanation. And it's sort of boring to just conclude, this guy was tired with his life and just kind of picked up and left.
And do you think that they were resistant to saying anything that could lead to panic?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's a big part of it. And I think, they were just resistant to kind of, this almost sensationalized explanation of a serial killer. Police tend to kind of push away from those sort of explanations. But I think, to some degree, they had blinders on. I think it might seem sensationalist to say serial killer, but when you have these, these sorts of cases, this many cases and with this many similarities, it's kind of hard to conclude anything else. And so, yeah, the 3 original missing persons cases that had their own task force that sort of went nowhere, and then you had 2 additional ones, many years later, and police were still saying, we don't think there's any connection, we don't think it's a serial killer, and I think to some degree that was irresponsible.
Now, as a journalist, because you have been saying, look, I think this is a real possibility that now seems to be in fact what took place, are you getting response now from the community, from people who are calling you with tips?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the number of people who've reached out to me over the last couple of weeks to say, I knew Bruce McArthur, I knew one of the victims, in one case, 2 cases, somebody who was actually attacked by Bruce McArthur. I've heard from people who have said, listen, I actually know somewhere where he worked, I didn't want to call the police, but if you want to go check it out, happening all the time now. And I think this is what the police overlooked from the very beginning. It's that the community is not a hindrance to this investigation, it's a huge asset, and the media is a big part of that. I think when the police tried to downplay the prospect of a serial killer, they were basically overlooking a huge resource, which is the community. The community actually has a lot of tips, and sometimes those tips they don't want to bring to the police. The queer community and the police have not always had the best relationship, and there's still a lot of kind of strained relations there. On the other hand, I have a better connection with that community, and they're actually, in some cases, more willing to talk to me than to talk to their local, police detective.
Justin, thanks for this.
Absolutely.
Good work.
Thanks.